Hello, I'm Neil Bindemann. I'm the director and founder of the Person-Centered Neurosciences Society. And over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'd like to explain and take you through some thoughts as to why this talk is titled Nourishing, a World of Wellness Through the Rebalancing of Emotional Health. This is going to be the first of three short talks to cover this topic. I'd like to start with exploring the origin and the meaning of the medical word etiology. It's spelt in two different ways because one is the British way and one is very often spelt differently in America. But that word means that the science that deals with the causes or origin of disease and the factors which produce or predispose toward a certain disease or disorder. And as an example, I'm going to explore Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease is caused by a loss of nerve cells in part of the brain called the substantia nigra. This leads to a reduction in a chemical called dopamine, or a neurotransmitter, this is called, in the brain. That was taken from an NHS website, and interestingly, Parkinson's UK's website it states we don't yet know exactly why people get Parkinson's, but researchers think it's a combination of age, genetic, and environmental factors that lead to the dopamine producing cells, the nerve cells, to die. That etiology of a condition is based on something that we call the germ theory. Now, the germ theory was a scientific theory proposed by Louis Pasteur back in the 19th century for many diseases, which states that microorganisms known as pathogens or germs are the cause of disease. Interestingly, at the same time, there was an alternative theory, and that theory is commonly referred to as the host theory, and it was proposed by Anton Bichon, another scientist. It's regarded to be very much a health-centric theory that recognizes most pathogens as scavengers, only capable of instigating disease in an unbalanced host. And what's more is there's growing scientific evidence over the last several years that this alternative theory is regarded as actually a more true theory. Why more true? Well, really, both of these theories have got validity, very much so. But this other theory about the host theory seems to be, as I say, maybe more valid and therefore more true. So does this suggest that the current definition of etiology actually needs challenging, especially if we are to see the current illness behavior paradigm transformed to be one of wellness, as in the title of this talk? And one creative way to do that is perhaps to consider a different word, a very similar word, etiology, but spelt just that bit different. And as it says, this is more about bringing life to medicine. And the definition of this word is laid out here. The science of emotional health that explains how, through becoming more aware of the significance of rebalancing emotional health, especially after what I've termed an acquired mind injury, the person can start to generate thoughts with the belief that a person is a creator of wellness and not a victim of illness. So on that kind of basis, and as a creator of wellness, I would like to ask you this question, and I'd like you to consider this. Why would and how can what we term multifunctional neurochemicals that your body needs to function as nature intended and for you to be well suddenly become the causes of illnesses or associated with those, such as Parkinson's and brain tumours? For me, it doesn't seem to make sense, nor does it seem neurological. And to look at that in a bit more detail, I think what we do need to do is to explore why I've put into here the science of emotional health. So we need to look at what is emotional health. Well, I think it starts with what is an emotion. Now that is a complex experience of consciousness, bodily sensation and behavior that reflects the personal significance of a thing, an event or a situation. And that's been adapted from Wikipedia. So what's an emotional experience though? Well, it's that which can be expressed externally, what you and the person can see, that which you and the person can feel, an internal process. And why do I say that? Well, because of the work of people like Lisa Feldman-Barrett and also Professor Mark Brackett. Lisa's book is a very, very good book on how emotions are made, and Mark Brackett's work is excellent on permission to feel. Because as they just point out, because emotions and feelings are believed to be created. But how is that happening? Well, there's plenty of evidence suggested that it's through the release and then the actions, interactions and reactions of neurochemicals. Where do those neurochemicals get released from? Well, they're from the cells in the body, including the brain and the spine, which become associated with a process that alters a person's feeling of physical and mental well-being. And this quote is from this very famous book called Molecules of Emotion by Dr. Candace Pert, who back in the 1970s and 80s did all the research and discovered the opiate receptor. And as some of you will know, opiates are connected with pain relief. And when she was exploring this and found the receptor, her logic was that the only reason that made any sense for an opiate receptor to be in the brain in the first place was if the body itself produced some kind of substance or organic chemical. And that substance is what are commonly known as endorphins. Endorphin is a word which is made up of two words. It's split down the middle. Endo, which means made within, endogenous, orphine, which is shortened for the morphine. So, but what triggers the body to release those chemicals for the person to perform actions, reactions, and interactions? And where does the information come from? And how does it reach the brain for the person to then respond or react? Well, it's our senses, the 5 key senses of hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and seeing. So it's not just what can alter the balance of neurochemicals in the body, but who can alter the balance of neurochemicals in the body. A person receptive to triggers on an external and physical level is also a body that is receptive at an internal and cellular level. So what you're seeing here is on that cellular level something called the receptor, which is like a docking station, and those are signaling molecules, which are those neurochemicals that can get released after being triggered. And as a result of that, we see these types of responses and reactions physically and mentally. So we also feel the things like heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure, butterflies in the stomach. But what about the person who feels less receptive to the trigger? They can react outwardly, physically and mentally, to protect the person. But what about that person who doesn't react outwardly? Does the brain still respond at a cellular level? Well, You will have probably experienced those changes to your hearing after a nightclub. So yes, because the operating system has been programmed to rebalance the body to zero. The natural response is that we come back down to zero, and I'll come onto that in a few minutes as to what I mean by the zero. But at first, those neurochemicals are still released due to the trigger, because the trigger is external to you. What if the brain or mind is less receptive though? That means the concentration of the signaling chemicals will rise because the receptors are therefore not present. And when they're not present, those signaling molecules increase and then can circulate around the body. But remember, as I said earlier, balance is key. Balance in the scientific realm is what we call homeostasis. And homeostasis is all about the natural forces that returns all systems to that balanced state. i.e., what comes must go. And how do we know this? Well, it's happening in nature constantly. As we breathe out, the trees breathe in. And as the trees breathe out, we breathe in. How can it happen in the body though? Well, there are basically two ways. The first is this aspect of the signaling molecules being released. They bind the receptor because they've travelled to find that receptor, and then they trigger the cell to do the action. And as a result, also the molecule gets taken in to the cell and is metabolized away. Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to take you through a series of research. And I'm going to do that in the second part. So the second part of this talk will be coming up very shortly, and it'll be there for you to select and play when you're ready to. So thanks for listening to that first part, and I'll be back shortly with the second one.